Now, King Charles wished his grandson Archie a happy 4th birthday during an emotional family gathering after the coronation.
Reports are emerging that a rift is widening amid growing tension between Prince Harry and King Charles.
King Charles told Harry that Archie would never be called a prince, and that broke their family apart for good. After hiding behind old rules, the king finally faced Harry, and what he said was cold. Archie, who should have been celebrated, was treated like he didn't belong. No title, no welcome. Hold tight, because what King Charles said next will leave you shocked and heartbroken.
A storm over a small prince. King Charles spent a lifetime crafting his image, shaping his future reign with caution and strategic silence. But deep inside the stone walls of Buckingham Palace, a conversation started that not even centuries of protocol could contain. The spark? Prince Archie, Harry's firstborn, born into the royal lineage, yet placed at the margins from the very beginning. But what they set in motion would haunt Prince Archie's place in history. When Archie entered the world, it should have been a time of unity. Instead, it unveiled deep cracks in the royal foundation. Unlike his cousins, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, Archie did not receive a royal title at birth. No gold-embroidered announcement, no royal decree, just a soft, awkward press statement calling him Master Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor, like a footnote instead of a headline. At first glance, the palace claimed it was due to an old law, one signed back in 1917 by King George V. Only children and grandchildren of the reigning monarch could hold the title of prince or princess. Archie, being Queen Elizabeth II's great-grandchild, simply did not qualify. But that explanation cracked quickly under pressure. When Prince William's children were born, Queen Elizabeth herself bent the rules. She issued a special letters patent in 2012, ensuring every one of William's children would be royal from the moment they opened their eyes. No debates, no hesitation. So why was Archie different? Beneath the polished smiles and official statements, there were whispers, too persistent to ignore. Race, bloodlines, favoritism, traditions dressed as excuses. The public watched, puzzled, as the newborn baby was subtly sidelined. The optics, the silence, the absence, it all spoke louder than any official explanation. The palace could lean on history, but history had already proven flexible when it wanted to be. This wasn't just a clerical error or forgotten paperwork. This was a message stitched into the fabric of the monarchy, unspoken but unmistakable. It suggested something rotten under the gold leaf and family crests. It told the world without saying a word who truly belonged and who didn't. The issue did not stay contained. Prince Harry, already bruised by years of royal pressure, grew defensive. Meghan, who had weathered storms of racial commentary and media attack, was furious. Their son's future, his identity, his place in the world was at stake. And in a family where titles meant power, protection, and precedent, being excluded wasn't just symbolic, it was structural. Behind velvet curtains and gilded doors, there were meetings, tense ones, heated ones. Conversations where tradition slammed against progress, where old bloodlines resisted new realities. And in those rooms, the unspoken rule held firm. Some things change, but not everything. Not yet. Harry demanded answers. If the monarchy could adjust rules for William's children, why not his? Why was his son being set apart? No answer satisfied. Some whispered that slimming down the monarchy was the reason. Others hinted that Archie's mixed heritage made things complicated in ways no one wanted to admit publicly. And King Charles? The man who once dreamed of a modernized monarchy found himself trapped between centuries of expectation and a son unwilling to accept silence as an answer. When Harry pushed too hard, the dam broke. A private conversation turned into a confrontation that peeled away all civility. One that didn't just reveal disagreement, but rupture. It wasn't about crowns or ceremonies anymore. It was about belonging, about blood, about whether the monarchy was a family or just a brand guarding its image at all costs. The bond between father and son didn't just fray, it tore. No press release ever described the shouting. No news outlet captured the rawness of a father and son who no longer spoke the same language. Harry stormed out of that meeting with more than frustration. He left with a wound that would not heal, a wound rooted in something far older than either of them, a legacy that demanded compliance and punished deviation. From that moment, the separation between the Sussexes and the rest of the royal family hardened into something permanent. Harry and Meghan packed their lives and their dreams into suitcases and left. Across the Atlantic, they built a life in California, far from the traditions and the frozen smiles they once knew, far from the courtiers and press leaks and rituals, but not far enough to forget. Yet even across oceans, the past haunted them. Titles withheld, birthrights questioned, a monarchy stubbornly clinging to an image that did not include them. And every time the family appeared on that famous palace balcony, Archie's absence was louder than the cheers. The confrontation with King Charles wasn't just an ugly argument behind palace doors. It was a moment when the royal family revealed its true priorities. And it cost them more than anyone inside those walls dared to admit. It wasn't just one family falling apart. It was the crown showing its cracks. Prince Archie, too young to understand, became a symbol without even trying. His missing title spoke louder than any speech. His absence from royal traditions screamed louder than any pageantry. The monarchy had drawn a line, and Archie had been placed on the wrong side of it. In California, he grew up under sunny skies, without curtsies or cameras waiting at hospital doors. A different world, a freer one. But every birthday, every headline, every photo missing from the royal lineup whispered the same reminder. He had been pushed aside, not forgotten, but deliberately excluded. And so the question lingers. Would the monarchy ever recover from this choice? Would the old walls bend to let new blood in, or would they crack and collapse trying to hold it out? Could an institution survive if it clung too tightly to the past while ignoring the family it claimed to protect? The confrontation between King Charles and Prince Harry was not about a title. It was a battle for the soul of the monarchy itself, a struggle between appearance and substance, between duty and dignity. And it did not end with that meeting. It followed them across continents. It echoed in interviews, in memoirs, in headlines. It settled into silences and widened in every public appearance where one family stood together while another remained absent. And it was only just beginning. The title that never came. When Queen Elizabeth II passed away, a new era dawned. King Charles, once the heir waiting endlessly in the shadows, finally took the throne. Across the world, ceremonies rolled out. Trumpets sounded. Old oaths were renewed. The monarchy dusted off its crown and stepped into the spotlight once again, polishing its ancient image for a modern gaze. But deep within the castle walls, one shadow refused to lift. Prince Archie, grandson to the king, still had no official title. His place within the royal family, once assumed by birthright, now hung suspended in an uncomfortable silence. By all traditional standards, the new king's grandchildren automatically should have been upgraded. It was more than custom. It was law, laid down more than 100 years ago. Grandchildren of the monarch become prince or princess. No paperwork required, no waiting games, no political maneuvering. A simple inheritance of identity passed down through blood alone. And yet, Archie remained without a title. His sister, Lilibet, too. The silence stretched louder than any public statement, heavier than any crown. The world noticed. The media asked. Royal watchers demanded explanations. Palace aides shuffled nervously through briefings, spinning words into meaningless circles. Behind the carefully staged photographs and scripted interviews, something was cracking. The truth was harder to ignore. Something about Archie's place in the royal family was being quietly but deliberately erased. Buckingham Palace had mastered the art of controlled denial. They hid behind ancient rules and vague promises of future announcements. They clung to technicalities to deflect from a deeper truth no statement could cleanly explain. Behind closed doors, another private confrontation brewed, tense and inevitable, one that would tear the family even further apart. When Harry realized that months had passed without action, he pushed again. He asked the palace directly, why were Archie and Lilibet not being acknowledged? Why had the monarchy embraced William's children without hesitation, yet stalled for his own? The contrast was too glaring to ignore. The double standard is too bold to dismiss. What he got back was not what he expected. The message, delivered softly but brutally, was clear. King Charles was considering a streamlined monarchy. Fewer working royals, fewer titles, fewer attachments. The Sussex children, living oceans away in California, would not be prioritized. Out of sight, out of the crowd. It was not about love or family or tradition, they said. It was about survival, relevance, optics, protecting the image of the institution at all costs, even when it came at the expense of its blood. But Harry didn't buy it. To him, it sounded like justification for something far uglier, a willingness to sever ties with his children as if they were burdens rather than heirs. The monarchy's need to survive had chosen its scapegoats. Bloodlines trimmed for convenience. That second confrontation with King Charles was not fiery like the first. It was colder, sharper. Two men standing on opposite cliffs, shouting across a widening canyon. One defending an institution's legacy. The other defended his family's future. No apologies were exchanged, no compromises were made, only a deeper understanding that the bond between them had been irrevocably broken. Harry walked away, knowing the monarchy he once trusted had no place for his son. Not really, not fully. He was not just losing a title for Archie. He was watching an entire history slip through his hands, one golden tradition after another, vanishing into silence, into carefully orchestrated forgetfulness. The fracture spread wider than the walls of Buckingham Palace. It seeped into every tabloid headline, every public statement carefully sanitized for mass consumption. The wound was raw, undeniable. As the rift deepened, Harry and Meghan planted their roots in Montecito. Sunshine replaced the ceremony. Privacy replaced protocol. Freedom replaced duty. But their move was not just about escaping paparazzi or carving out a new life. It was about building an identity for their children, separate from a kingdom that refused to fully claim them. A quiet rebellion stitched together with each new morning far from royal rituals. In California, Archie could grow up without titles weighing down his childhood. No rigid expectations, no golden cages, just family, freedom, and the right to shape his own future. To laugh without measured politeness. To live without the invisible shackles of tradition. But the cost was steep. The very history Archie was born into, centuries of kings and queens, victories and scandals, bloodlines and betrayals, became a distant, crumbling backdrop. A lineage he might someday learn about in books, not live firsthand. A throne he would recognize only as a stranger. The monarchy lost more than a grandson that day. It lost a bridge to modernity. It lost a chance to prove it could evolve with grace. It lost a future it desperately claimed to protect. Instead, it clung to its old walls, polished its old mirrors, and watched a new legacy slip quietly away across the ocean, beyond its grasp. Months turned into years. Archie and Lilibet grew up without coronation ceremonies or balcony appearances. Their birthdays were celebrated under California skies, not in grand British ballrooms. Their milestones were marked by family laughter, not by official proclamations. They built castles in the sand, not in ancient stone. Occasionally, rumors surfaced. Whispers that King Charles might reverse course. Those titles might eventually come, tucked inside quiet announcements. Those wounds might someday be patched with golden seals and practiced smiles. But by then, it hardly mattered. The damage had been done. Titles handed out after public humiliation and private heartbreak were not gestures of honor. They were reminders, etched deep, of what had been withheld when it mattered most. Symbols of absence, not acceptance. And Archie, innocent and unknowing, would carry that legacy whether he wanted to or not. He would grow up in a world that remembered the slight, even if he did not. Every headline, every documentary, every whispered conversation would weave the same silent thread. That once, long ago, the royal family chose not to fully claim him. Not because of law, not because of protocol, but because of choice. And choices, once made, have a way of echoing louder than any crown ever could. The interview that shook the world. If the private confrontations with King Charles revealed cracks in the royal foundation, Meghan Markle's interview with Oprah Winfrey took a sledgehammer to it. Under the glaring intensity of television lights, Meghan opened a door the palace had desperately tried to keep sealed shut. What was once whispered behind velvet curtains was now broadcast for millions to hear. The world listened, breathless, as Meghan spoke, not just about struggles with the press or the frosty demeanor of palace courtiers, but about deeper wounds, about conversations questioning her unborn son's skin color, about closed-door talks that cast doubt on whether Archie would ever be granted a title, about the slow, slicing pain of exclusion. Behind the monarchy's carefully polished smiles, there had been quiet brutality. It wasn't a carefully massaged royal statement. It was raw. It was painful. It shattered in real time the image the monarchy had spent generations sculpting. The damage was immediate. It was irreversible. Suddenly, the missing title for Archie wasn't a bureaucratic oddity. It became a wound displayed under a microscope, festering in public view. It was a question mark, loud, burning, and inescapable, against Buckingham Palace's crumbling reputation. Every silence from the palace, every rigid tradition, every whispered protocol now looked suspicious. Where once tradition had been a badge of honor, it now seemed a shield for prejudice. The palace eventually responded with a short, measured statement. Recollections may vary. But the real battlefield had shifted. The press releases and the formal addresses had become irrelevant. The real judgment was happening in the streets, on social media, in dinner table conversations around the world. And in this new court of public opinion, Archie's sidelining was not perceived as oversight. It was seen as deliberate. For centuries, royal scandals played out behind fortress walls, whispered through corridors lined with centuries of history. But this was a new world. A world wired with cameras, fueled by real-time news feeds and relentless social media. This time, there was no hiding. Across continents, people questioned the monarchy's values. How could an institution that symbolizes unity and continuity treat its own bloodline with such visible detachment? What did it mean when the stewards of national identity faltered in matters so intimate and so human? And so began a new kind of exile, not one marked by proclamations or declarations of treason, but one far more personal. A slow, invisible pushing away. A retreat, not just from titles and ceremonies, but from connection, from heritage, from belonging. In the sunshine of Montecito, far from the stone walls of Windsor, Archie learned to ride bikes and chase butterflies, blissfully unaware of the battles his existence had sparked. The irony cut deep. In seeking to protect the monarchy's image, the institution had severed ties to a part of its future. They had not just stripped him of a title, they had stripped him of history. And no delayed decree, no belated embrace, no ceremonial pomp could ever truly restore what had been lost. The shockwaves from Meghan's revelations did not stay contained within the gossip pages. They bled into every part of royal life. Headlines turned sharper. Public trust, once unwavering, wavered. Even longtime royalists found themselves shifting uncomfortably in their allegiances, grappling with a new, less forgiving reality. Inside palace walls, the machinery of public relations whirred into overdrive. Tours were hastily rebranded to project diversity and compassion. Younger royals were pushed into the spotlight to embody modernity. Carefully curated family portraits were released, filled with smiles wider than ever. But the stain remained. It wasn't just the details of Meghan's testimony that haunted the monarchy. It was what those details symbolized. a child, royal by blood, pushed to the margins, not because of protocol, but because of fear. Because tradition weaponized against change. The world watched as Queen Elizabeth II passed the torch to a new generation. As King Charles stood crowned beneath the glittering regalia of a 1,000-year-old tradition. As familiar ceremonies played out with familiar faces, but no amount of gold or history could cover the absence that had become glaringly obvious. Archie. In the aftermath, Archie became more than just a child born into privilege. He became a mirror held up to an institution desperately trying to balance on the edge of relevance. A reminder that bloodline alone could no longer paper over deeper fractures. What does it mean to belong to a family that accepts you only halfway? To be celebrated in tradition but excluded in practice? To inherit a history that hesitates to claim you? These were the questions Archie embodied, questions that no royal decree, no speech from a gilded balcony could silence. The monarchy had not envisioned Archie when it imagined its future. They had pictured continuity, tradition, and polished pageantry, not a symbol of the uncomfortable, unavoidable necessity for change. And therein lay the power. Because in the end, the battle was never about a title printed on a birth certificate or a line in the order of succession. It was about the soul of the monarchy itself, about whether the institution would continue to shelter outdated values behind a facade of tradition, or whether it would evolve painfully but necessarily into something worthy of surviving another century. Archie's life, his ordinary joys, his milestones captured not by palace photographers but by doting parents in a California garden, became the answer louder than any royal proclamation. Each step he took in freedom was a step further from a system that had failed him. The world no longer looked at the monarchy with respect, but with doubt and judgment. Archie's life in California became a quiet reminder of everything the palace tried to hide. While the royals tried to fix their image, a quiet exile had already begun, far from the castles and crowns, a crown too heavy to wear. By the time the official titles finally arrived, it was too late. King Charles, under growing public scrutiny and internal pressure, allowed Archie and Lilibet to be called Prince and Princess. It was a quiet move, almost embarrassed, tucked behind other palace news, an afterthought rather than an act of celebration. No grand announcement could erase the years of silence. No belated gesture could undo the lingering sense of exclusion, the message that had already been written into the fabric of Archie's early years. The damage had been done, stitched into the seams of his story. Every missed opportunity, every unspoken word, every carefully calculated silence had left its mark, forming invisible scars that no title could heal. For Archie, the title did not arrive like a coronation. It fell like a relic, heavy, complicated, and almost meaningless. It was not a crown placed with joy. It was a chain, linking him forever to a family that had once weighed his worth in fearful whispers. It was a reminder that acceptance was conditional, a reluctant concession rather than an embrace. He would carry the title of prince, but it would never shine the way it should have. It would never rest naturally on his head. It would always remind him and the world that acceptance had come not out of love, but out of necessity, out of fear. And in that knowledge, the title would carry an ache that no ceremony could ever polish away. As Archie grew, so did the questions about his place in a history he had never asked to inherit. The eyes of the world, still fixated on the institution that had failed him, would follow his every move. Was he royalty? Was he free? Could he ever be both? Or would he always be suspended between two worlds, one that had rejected him and one he was forging with his own hands? Would he embrace the monarchy that once hesitated to claim him? Would he step onto royal soil as a proud prince or as a reluctant outsider? Would he forge a bridge between the ancient and the new? Or would he turn his back on it all, a living reminder of what happens when tradition forgets compassion? The truth was brutal. Archie's future was paved not by choices he made, but by choices made for him. by conversations whispered in corridors lined with portraits of kings, by fears buried beneath crowns, by a system desperate to protect its image, even at the cost of its humanity. In Montecito, far from London's gray skies and heavy expectations, Archie's future stretched wide and wild. He could be anything: a leader, a creator, a storyteller, a fighter for change. He could be the architect of his own destiny, untethered from gilded expectations. But he could never be untouched by the past. Every step would carry the echo of what had been denied to him. Every success would bear the imprint of the walls he had been forced to scale. And every time he looked back, the shadows of that lost belonging would follow. For Harry and Meghan, the battle for their children's future was never just about protocol. It was about dignity, about being seen, about ensuring that Archie and Lilibet would never be pawns in a game they did not choose. It was about giving them the freedom to define themselves before the world tried to do it for them. Every decision they made, leaving England, rejecting old traditions, forging a new path, was born from the painful confrontation back at Buckingham Palace. A confrontation that made clear that not all bloodlines were treated equally. When Harry looked at his son, he saw the crossroads of history. He saw the cost of choosing freedom over comfort, authenticity over ceremony. He saw the price of saying no to a system that demanded unquestioning loyalty. The monarchy could never fully grasp that loss. To them, bloodline was supposed to mean loyalty. No questions, no doubts, no resistance. It was a rigid system, incapable of understanding that real loyalty is born not from obedience, but from being seen. But Archie's existence demanded more. Demanded to be seen, not just as a symbol, but as a person. Demanded a kind of love that could not be brokered in titles or ceremonies. Demanded that dignity be unconditional, and Harry, finally free from the ancient walls that had once promised protection but delivered judgment, vowed that history would not repeat itself. His children's lives would not be confined by gilded cages. They would not inherit wounds disguised as duty. Inside Buckingham Palace, the gilded portraits still hang, eternal and unblinking. Kings and queens draped in velvet and gold, staring out from a history built on the illusion of permanence. Their gazes seem to defy the passage of time, but not even stone and paint can stop the world from changing. Something shifted when Archie was denied his rightful place. The cracks in the monarchy's foundation, long whispered about, began to gape open. The questions, once murmured in corners, rang loudly through streets and headlines. Tradition, once seen as strength, now looked brittle, an excuse for exclusion. Reverence turned to doubt. Awe turned to scrutiny. Can a kingdom built on bloodlines survive if it forgets the blood? Can a monarchy rooted in history endure if it refuses to evolve? The answer remains unwritten, waiting in the choices Archie will make, in the battles he may fight, in the legacy he may someday build. His life, though shaped by forces beyond his control, will be his own to command. He was born into a world that measured worth by birthright, but he is growing up in a world that measures worth by something far greater: character, courage, conscience, compassion, and the relentless ability to break free from golden chains, to choose truth over tradition, to value humanity over heritage. It is not the castles or titles that define greatness. It is the strength to choose freedom when the easier path is obedience. It is the bravery to walk away from a throne that demands silence. It is the audacity to imagine a life beyond the palace gates, a life built not on duty, but on dignity. The royal family kept its titles, its castles, its ceremonies, its meticulously polished image. But it lost something far more precious. It lost the chance to become better. It lost the opportunity to embrace the future. It lost the possibility of healing old wounds. It lost the chance to show the world that even the oldest institutions could still change. It lost Archie. And that loss will echo longer than any reign, longer than any crown, longer than any hollow ceremony ever could. It will echo in every empty gesture, every missed opportunity, every silent regret. It will live in the quiet knowledge that when faced with a chance to do better, they clung instead to the past and let the future slip away. Was Archie's exclusion a simple tradition or undeniable proof of deeper prejudice? Share your opinion in the comments. We want to hear your voice. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more insight.